Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So I've been playing PTR for quite a few days now, and I've gotten quite a few characters leveled up to max and decked them out with all sorts of equipment. Tried out fun builds like the Frozen Orb Sorceress, the Necromancer minions, and so forth and so on. And I'd like to give you guys my feedback on PTR and talk about some of the things that are going on. Without further ado, let's get started. So PTR, Public Test Realm. A Public Test Realm is obviously where we were testing out all the new changes that they're coming out with for the new season. Now, keep in mind, however, that these changes are not the seasonal changes. And the seasonal changes have yet to be revealed, and it's very important to remember this because what we're dealing with right now is changes that are going to be across the board on the entire game, internal realm included, as well as the seasonal realm. Now, they've changed a lot of stuff, and I feel like I had to take notes and I had to write everything down. First off, let's talk about the tempering system. So the tempering system kind of has a lot of wasted affixes. I do feel like a lot of the affixes are in a category that I would call junk affixes, which is a little weird. A lot of the times when you're trying to re-roll an item or with your affixes or whatever, you're going to find that you basically have to choose from a specific number of affixes. And a lot of the times you go in here and you're going to take a look at things like this one, for instance. The Corpse Explosion size kind of seems useful for Corpse Explosion Necromancer. Corpse Potential size is it's a meh. It's an okay stat, I guess, if you're trying to build pull in, but Corpse Potential is already amazing anyway. I'm not really sure how Corpse Potential size is going to make that big of a difference. Iron Maiden size, and Decrepify size, they're both okay, meh at best, and then Curse Duration, which again is a kind of a meh. Some of these that they force you to choose, especially when you take things like Natural Resistance, where you just have resistances across the board, not really all that amazing. But then you have stuff like this, which gives you life, armor, and dodge chance and whatnot, which is more useful. Now, a lot of the times when you're tempering an item, you'll find that sometimes you have some pretty good options. And depending on what character you are, like for instance, if you're trying to get your minions to dish out damage or you're firing off fire bolts or whatever, there's a lot of ways that you can potentially make this, work to your advantage. Like for instance, on the Firebolt Sorceress, I've been playing around with one of the new uniques, which basically allows you to shoot off a firebolt, which then, when it passes through your firewall, can split into 4 additional bolts, which does a pretty massive amount of damage. And the being able to control the direction and the distance of your firewall gives you a very interesting and fun gameplay style. And one of the affixes that you can add onto your tempering item is you can add the ability to chance to cast 2 firebolts instead of 1, right? So a double cast. Well, this is huge for a character that's splitting her attacks like this, because when you use your firewall, you can get 1 or 2 firebolts instead of just the simple 1. And when you cast them through the wall, you can actually get multiple firebolts. And so by stacking things in this way and getting some very interesting effects, you can definitely increase your damage output pretty dramatically. This is actually one of the more fun builds. Not only can you take advantage of this by shotgunning, like this, by going in close range, but you can also use your firewalls at extreme distance, and you can have the split happen further away, which is really cool. And there's some pretty cool stuff in this new patch, and I gotta give props. Sometimes the lack of options was pretty stark by contrast to the other pieces of equipment. So when you go into the tempering system and you look at what options are available to you, some pieces of equipment have a massive number of options for tempering. You can add just about any stat to certain pieces of equipment, like your weapon or your focus. Amulets, for instance, have a lot of options as well. And when you go in there and you take, say, something like a weapon, let's go ahead and take this weapon right here, and let's just put it into the tempering system just to kind of give you an idea. And when you put it in there, this one has just the weapons and then the offensive, but as you can see, there's you got 4 categories in each. However, when you put something like an amulet in, I'm not sure if I have any amulets left. But amulets tend to have a large number of potential options. Let's try the amulet we have on. And of course, I've already added them. But generally, you have access to offensive, defensive, utility, mobility, and resource. You've got basically 5 categories to pull from on certain items. And then other items, when you put those items in there, they basically have a much smaller pool, and you can only pull from like 2 different categories. And what I mean by this is basically that sometimes it feels like some items are very highly customizable, and others just like you're kind of just forced to take whatever they've given you, essentially. And sometimes what they give you is crap, and sometimes what they give you is amazing, and there doesn't seem to be much in between. Like for instance, when I was looking at the affixes earlier, I was paying attention to some of them, and like for instance, just let me pull up an example here. Let's go with this one. This is the Frost Augments. And so forth and so on. So look, we got chance for Frostbolt projectiles to cast twice. I mean, that's amazing, right? Chance for Frozen Orb to cast twice. That's amazing. Chance for Ice Shards to cast twice. That's amazing too. But then we just got Blizzard Size. And while I'm not saying Blizzard Size isn't necessarily like the most horrible affix in the world, by comparison to something casting twice, Blizzard Size doesn't really seem like the most amazing affix. You kind of get what I'm saying here, is that like let's look at the fire ones, for instance. So we've got chance for fireball projectiles cast twice. That's amazing. Chance for fireball projectiles cast twice. That's amazing too. Incinerate size, meh. Meteor size, kind of meh. Firewall size, kind of meh. I mean, we run into these weird situations where sometimes you're looking at them and you're like, okay, that's amazing. And then if you're not like a firebolt or fireball sorceress, and you're like an Incinerate, Meteor, or Firewall, these don't really seem like as good options by comparison to some of the others, and you might be looking at some other stuff in general. These over here, these Elemental Surge ones, these are also interesting because they allow you to activate your Tal Rashes, which is pretty crazy. Although they're also kind of nuts because you can literally put these on like level 5 items, and you can literally walk around just one-shotting everything, which is kind of hilariously bad. Moving on, there's a big issue with the same affix rolling on the item multiple times in a row, which wouldn't be like the biggest deal if it weren't for the fact that, you know, you have a maximum tempering value, right? So there's a maximum attempts on an item, and once you hit the maximum tempering attempts, you basically brick the item, and once it's been bricked, for instance, like this wand right here, which is currently at 0 of 5 tempers, this item has been bricked. It can't be changed any further, right? So we're currently at the situation where I can't do anything to it. Well, if you're trying to re-roll the item, and let's say you're trying to get, I don't know, plus 1 to 2 warmth, or maybe you want the flame shield duration, but you keep rolling the lucky hit 5% chance to heal, and you roll the lucky hit 5% chance to heal like 6 times in a row, something is definitely wrong. And I was telling people this earlier, is that there definitely seems to be some sort of like hinky stuff going on within the probability for this, because it shouldn't be this way. And I actually pulled up a coin flip probability calculator, right? So let's pretend that you have 6 coin flips, and you want to have at most 0 heads, right? So you're just trying to not get the same result multiple times in a row, or just get something else other than what you've gotten, right? So 0 heads would represent 6 failures in a row, which is a chance of 1.563%. So it's less than 2% chance that you will have 6 failures in a row. And the higher that you go, the more times that you have failures in a row, you can see that the probability continues to decrease lower and lower and lower with more failures. But for some reason or another, like, I literally witnessed this essentially rolling the same exact thing more than 6 times in a row, and literally just bricking the item. So like once the item reaches its maximum number of tempers, the item's bricked and you can't do anything else. And so if you find something that's like exceptionally good, like say for instance this pair of pants, and you were trying to re-roll this pair of pants to get a specific effect, like maybe you wanted, in my case, would probably be a mobilize duration. I could continue to re-roll the item until I got a mobilize duration, or I could just eventually brick it because it just continues to roll like freeze duration, which is the one that I don't need. And it'll roll freeze duration so many times in a row that it makes me wonder how the hell the game can literally run these calculations and fail that many times in a row to roll anything else. And this also happened with the master crafting system. So when doing the master crafting system, you have to upgrade items, which is a little bit different. And you put the item in here, and you have to actually upgrade the equipment with success rates. So, like for instance, with this one, I'm currently at a 30% success rate, which is pretty bad. However, I've had some of these which are literally at a much higher success rate, like 70%, fail multiple times in a row trying to upgrade even just like a 70% increase. And again, it's the same exact thing as the tempering system, is that it seems like for some reason or another, it will literally let you fail like multiple times in a row without any care in the world. Even when your percentage chance is something as high as like 70%, it'll still fail multiple times in a row. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And for the master crafting system, it's not as big of a deal because at this point you're pretty high on resources. You're just farming pits. You're not really too worried about it. Like these aren't really so rare that they're like hard to come by. But you know, when you find like that god tier item that has like 2 or 3 greater affix rolls, or maybe you even find one that has 4, because apparently you can with unique items, and you find that really good one, and you start trying to throw your temper on there to get like this special effect, like say that you're this my kind of character, and you need to have that firebolt projectiles cast twice, because if you don't get that, it's going to break it. Well, rolling the wrong thing over and over and over again is definitely going to be rage inducing as you realize that you essentially never had any chance to get the roll that you wanted because it was just going to continue to roll something stupid like fireball chance instead of firebolt chance, which of course makes a big difference because you're not using fireball with this particular build. And it's just a pretty silly thing overall. The systems are interesting, but then at the same time, they're kind of they all kind of have issues with them at the moment. The tempering books, which is something that you have to find. So as you're going through the game, you need to find the tempering books. Well, I've done tons of content within the game. Helltides, I've done nightmare dungeons, pits. We've also killed plenty of bosses: Grigore, Varshan, Beast in the Ice. We've also killed plenty of Zir. We killed the 200 bosses a couple times. We've also killed Andariel, Duriel, etc. And like, I can't find the books to save my life. Like, some of the books are just like impossible to locate. There's basically 4 books for this category, and I only have one, and I'm pretty sure this is the one that they gave me. There is an issue, it seems like, in trying to find the books because they come from very specific sources. And not only that, but a lot of the times you'll just find the same book repeatedly. So, like, the books that I have been able to find, a lot of the times it's just the same book that I've already got. And so it literally tells me that I can't read it because I already have that book. And so I'm still looking for the books that I don't have. I kind of wish there was somewhere you could go that you could just like purchase the books maybe for like a fee. Maybe I could use some of this like mounting Neth iron that I seem to be accumulating in large values to spend on like some of the upgrade books or something, but it doesn't seem like it's the case. Also, there seems to be a huge issue with veiled crystals, just everything requiring way too much veiled crystals, no matter how many items I destroy, no matter how much equipment I get rid of, no matter how many dungeons I farm. It feels like I never have enough veiled crystals to properly deck out all my characters. And they're just not dropping in large enough quantities. They're not coming from the equipment in large enough quantities. And on top of that, everything that you do requires veiled crystals. It's insane. You need veiled crystals to add an affix to an item, about 20 there. You need veiled crystals to imbue an item. So if you're trying to add an aspect to the item, you need a relatively large amount of veiled crystals for that as well. So if I go on here and I try and add an aspect, you need 75 veiled crystals for that. And like, by the time you're done with all the veiled crystals that are required for literally every action, because just about every single action requires veiled crystals, you will be completely out of veiled crystals just like I am before too long. One recommendation I would make to you is, especially if they don't fix it, but even if they do fix it, they talked about only just reducing the amount of veiled crystals that things would require, but you may want to destroy every single item that you get in Season 4 up to a certain point, because you really got to stock up on veiled crystals for that push to the end to be able to get all of your equipment upgraded, like all your aspects assigned to your equipment. Like your freaking tempering requires the veiled crystals as well, which is a whole thing. And because of all the failures, every single time you fail, you're just eating veiled crystals. So you get 20 veiled crystals that you're eating up every time here that you fail, and you're also getting veiled crystals that get eaten up here every single time you fail as well. In this particular case, it's 12 veiled crystals for that. And then some of the items are a little bit less at lower tiers, like it's only like 6 here, but it all adds up so quick to the point where literally you're just like completely out of veiled crystals within a very short period of time. One of the things about the tempering, which I was talking about earlier, which is the junk projectiles, or the junk affixes. I already went over that, so that's all right. I mean, it really just doesn't feel like a lot of the times that you have much choice in the matter on what you're putting onto the item, which is really weird because the whole system is literally about choice, right? It's about like, hey, you put an item up here, you choose what you want to put on the item, and then you go from there. But then a lot of the times when you go in there and you actually are trying to figure out what to put on the item, you realize there's not really any good options to put in that particular affix slot because you can only put one affix per category. And the category just might not have anything good for your particular build. And I'm not saying that there's not anything good in the categories, but for your specific build, there might not be anything good in the categories, and you feel like it's just a wasted affix. The master crafting system. The animation for master crafting is just unnecessarily long, and skipping it is not really much faster than waiting for the animation. Also, I guess they wanted it to be a surprise. Like what happens to the item when you mastercraft it, right? So when you hit the button and it does this big long animation, and then like it comes out on the other end and it's like da 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 da. But the silly thing is that you can literally hold your mouse over the button before the animation ever finishes, and you can see what the hell happened, whether it was upgraded or not, like what the effect was, like the whole 9 yards. And then on top of that, like when you finish upgrading the item in the Mastercraft window, it shows you a preview that doesn't even work of like whatever was supposed to happen. So that's broken too. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that you failed literally over and over and over again with the master crafting system, like maybe the animation wouldn't be so bad. But you need to upgrade an item 12 times to hit it to its maximum tier, which means you have to look at that animation 12 times per item to give you an idea. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items just on the sorceress. Of course, some characters are more. Then you take your 10 items and you say, okay, well, we've got 12 upgrades for 10 items, which is 120 upgrades each. But there's a pretty huge failure rate, which multiplies this 120 by a pretty significant value. In fact, I would say that like out of 120, you are probably going to fail at least, if not more, about 60% of the 120. So you can take 120 minus 60%, actually, hold on, minus 40%, which is going to give us 72. So we're going to add that back to the 120. And you're looking at, to fully upgrade your equipment, you're looking at about 192-ish like views of this needlessly long animation. And then on top of this, that doesn't include replacing equipment. So once you start replacing equipment, now you've got another 12, you got another 12, another 12, plus failures. And it's just going to constantly stack up to the point where it just seems like a huge unnecessary waste of time. Like just the sheer number of times that you need to upgrade each piece of equipment, combined with the failures, combined with new pieces of equipment, combined with tempering those pieces of equipment, which is another whole thing, because you've got to temper each equipment twice, and chances are you're probably going to use up most of the 5 attempts that you have on the items, which means you've got another whole thing going on there with what is that? So let's calculate that out as well. So you've got another 12 items. Or sorry, what is it? 10 items, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 10. So you got 10 times 5 with like more than a 50% failure rate as well over on the tempering system, which, let's see here, probably something like you could at least multiply that by 2. So that's another like 100, like ish, give or take, little stupid animations that you've got to watch as well. Which means that like to fully upgrade a character, you're looking at somewhere around like 300 animations that you've got to look at to upgrade your character. The first time I sat there and actually upgraded my character, it took me like 2 hours. I'm kid you not. To sit there, customize my equipment, get all my things set up, get my Paragon board set up, upgrade all my equipment, and I couldn't even upgrade all of this because I didn't have all the materials for it, but I was able to temper my equipment and all that stuff. And like the sheer amount of time that it takes to get your character fully set up has been exponentially increased, which is unfortunate. If they could do something about these animations to reduce them a little bit, maybe do something about these ridiculous failure rates, which don't make any sense, it could be a lot better. Downcrafting mats for masterworking is ridiculously tedious. So what do I mean by this? Well, when you go and you want to upgrade an item, there's 3 different materials that you can use for upgrading items. There's obducite, there's ingolith, and there's nethiron. Now, if I wanted to turn my nethiron into ingol, I can do that. I can go to the alchemist, and the alchemist will convert down materials for me. You can't convert up, but you can convert down. And when you convert them down, you're basically gifted these stupid little boxes, and each one of these boxes will drop you like I think it's like 5 materials. And you've got to sit here and you've got to literally open up every single one of these to get access to all of your materials. And so down crafting your materials takes a extraordinarily long time just to sit here and open up all the boxes. And I don't know exactly why they did this. Maybe there's some kind of limitation of the number of items that you can convert at one time or something. But you're going to need these. Because it takes ingolith to do the second tier, it takes obducite to do the first tier, and it takes nethiron to do the last tier. And since you can't use one for the other, you can't crisscross them back and forth, essentially, you are going to be forced to do this. And the reason why you're going to be forced to do this is, well, because nethiron is so much better than the latter. So when I finish converting all of this to ingolith, I can literally take this ingolith and I can convert it down to obducite, which is probably what I'm going to do early game when Season 4 starts, is I'm going to go farm the nethiron. I'm going to get as high as I can because the nethiron gives you 5 ingolith, and 5 ingolith gives you 15 obducite, and so forth and so on, to the point where literally you have essentially an infinite amount of obducite if you do it that way. And the amount of obducite that you can get in each pit is so low that there's absolutely no reason to farm it in that particular pattern. You are much better rewarded for just simply going to the higher tiers and farming it at the higher tiers, getting the better material, and then down converting it. And I don't know exactly why they decided to do it this way, but I wanted to actually sit here and open up these pieces of equipment for you, or these boxes, so that you could really see how silly it is to have to down convert. Now, that was only 300 some odd boxes, okay? Now, if I take this ingolith and I convert this down into obducite, look at how many boxes I can make with the second material. 1,993 boxes. Better get to clicking, folks, because you're going to be clicking for a while. Tormented Bosses. Let's talk about Tormented Bosses. I was able to fight several versions of the Tormented Bosses. Varshan seems to be kind of bugged at the moment. He spawns, and then if you die during the fight, like he immediately like despawns, and then everything kind of like messes up to the point where you have to leave the game and join back. It's a whole thing. I mean, I could probably kill him if I could do it in one shot. But we kind of moved on from him because the amount of materials required, combined with the fact that you only get one shot at it, it was more beneficial to just go do some of the other ones. Barshan is okay. I mean, it seems like he's totally killable. Grigore was easily killable as well. We actually killed him twice. And that was how we found out that you only get one Resplendent Spark per 200 boss, which was a little weird. The rewards from the bosses didn't seem to be proportional to like the difficulty in killing them. On top of this, for some reason or another, the Beast in the Ice wasn't properly leveled. He's only level 150 instead of 200, and he's actually really easy by comparison to the others. On top of this, the items that they dropped were really strange. And what do I mean by strange? Well, like they would drop me like 4 pairs of like Fists of Fate or like 4 pairs of Flame Weaver gloves, and they were all the same exact glove, same exact unique. It was very strange. I mean, imagine you kill a boss and he drops you, you know, like a pair of Penitent Greaves, but instead of 1 pair of Penitent Greaves, he drops you 4 pairs of Penitent Greaves. And you're like, oh, well, you couldn't drop me anything else besides 4 pairs of Penitent Greaves, and that's exactly what the bosses were doing when we were killing them. Is they were literally dropping the same exact unique multiple times. Now, a lot of the bosses, like the higher end bosses, including Lilith, have a new mechanic basically where they have stacks that increase on you. So the Uber bosses or the Tormented bosses really aren't that difficult, but what they do have is they have a stacking damage increase which continues to stack on you until you eventually die. I can show you this really quickly with Uber Lilith. Won't take but a second. I can pretty much one-shot her almost immediately, but that's not really the point. Um, the point is to show you how the stacking buff is currently working. So when you go into any of these bosses, Grigore, Varshan, Lilith, there's always going to be something that is considered a one-shot, like it used to be considered a one-shot anyway. And anything that is considered a one-shot at this point has been changed into a stacking debuff, which will basically cause you to increasingly take large amounts of damage until you eventually die. The debuff usually appears right down here. It's usually in the shape of horns, and for Grigore, it's his lightning walls. So if you step into his lightning walls, it does the damage. For Varshan, it's his pizza cutter. For Beast in the Ice, it's his little like maneuver, like little attacks that he puts on the ground. You'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly which attack is the one that's giving you these stacks and how the stacks work. So let's go ahead and just force her into the next phase here. And the reason why we're going to force her into the next phase is because I want to show you the stacking buffs. So the way that she applies the stacking buffs in this one is the purple like projectile things that she shoots out. They technically are no longer one-shots, and instead what they do is they apply a stacking debuff to you repeatedly until you lose essentially your life. So you see how I have this takes damage increased from blood creation. That's one of them. And then the second one is the orbs. This is these orbs right here, which is takes exponentially increased damage from all sources. Usually when you get to about 3 stacks, it's too much. Once you start getting to about 3 stacks, 4 stacks, you are pretty much going to get to the point where no matter how much damage reduction you have, no matter how much tank ability you have, and of course it's going to be varying slightly depending on how tanky your character is, but there's always going to be a point at which you've made too many mistakes, and once you make too many mistakes and your stacks goes too high, you're going to die. And that's the way that they've kind of done these Uber bosses, is instead of making them overly difficult in the terms of like, hey, they're one-shotting you on a regular basis, or they have so much HP that you just can't kill them, or they're dishing out so many AoE effects that they're just, laying you into the dirt. It's actually more along the lines of, are you doing the mechanics correctly, which is actually very good, by the way. And if you are doing the mechanics correctly, then you're avoiding the stacks. And if you're avoiding the stacks, then you are generally going to have a pretty easy time with the bosses. In Varshan's case, it's the pizza cutter. So you basically just have to make sure that you're doing the pizza cutter correctly. You're getting into the empty spots on the pizza circle, and you can avoid basically the stacks entirely, and Varshan is pretty much a cakewalk. However, if you can't avoid the pizza circle and you do gain stacks, then you're going to die relatively easily. Same thing for Grigore, but Grigore's is even easier because all you really have to do is just make sure your back is facing toward a hard surface and not one of his lightning walls. And so because his main thing is he knocks you back into the lightning walls. So as long as you don't walk into the lightning wall and he doesn't knock you into the lightning wall, then you can pretty much avoid the stacks on Grigore entirely. And again, he ends up being pretty much a cakewalk. Beast in the Ice was a little bit more difficult, but just simply because he does a lot of knockbacks, and it is a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes when he lands on you while you're trying to do the mechanic. But he is only level 150, which made him extremely easy by comparison, and we pretty much just ripped him to shreds. So far, I do feel like the 200 bosses are either A, too weak, B, don't really have enough good, like, quality drops to make them worthwhile. Including, of course, boss mats, and this is a whole other thing. So the boss mats that are required for these guys is much higher. It's basically 5 times the normal amount. So whatever they cost in the current numbers, like if you're, for instance, you're fighting Duriel and it's 2 and 2, then it's going to be 5 times 2, which is 10. If it requires 5, then it's going to be 5 times 5, which is, I think it's 25 for Grigore, and so forth and so on. So it's 5 times the normal amount of mats to spawn these 200 versions. And the sad thing is that they do not give 5 times the amount of mats for their respective boss. So let me give you an example. So, like, let's say, for instance, you kill Grigore, and Grigore gives you, like 1 shard of agony, right? Well, that's exactly what he gives you in the normal version, right? And then when you fight the 200 version, he also gives you 1 shard of agony. So there's not really a whole lot of reason at the moment to actually fight the 200 versions, because number one, you can only get 1 Resplendent Spark total from killing them, and not just killing each one, which is what I had originally thought. I had originally thought it was 4 total or 6 total, like if you killed each 200 version, you would get 1 Resplendent Spark per, and then you wouldn't get another one after that, but you could at least collect 1 per Tormented Boss, and essentially get yourself 1 Uber Unique. But it's not 1 per boss, it's 1 total for all of them, because I don't know why. It seems rather stupid. I felt like it should have at least been 1 per boss, even if it was restricted, but instead it's 1 per total of all bosses. We've killed a bunch of them so far, and we basically still have only gotten 1 Resplendent Spark. And I can show you that, because despite all the bosses that we've killed, all the 200 bosses that we've killed, or the tormented version of the bosses that we've killed, you could see I still only have 1 Resplendent Spark here. So if they were dropping multiple Resplendent Sparks, like if I could get 1 from each boss, I would have multiple here. Actually, if I had 4, I would have turned them in for Ethereal's Might already, and I'd be playing around with Ethereal's Might. Moving on to aspect storage. Aspect storage is amazing. There's absolutely nothing bad about it. It is absolutely insanely good, and quite honestly, one of the best changes that they've made in a very long time. It was a community suggestion, by the way. Don't ever forget that this this amazing thing was actually something that was recommended by the community during one of the dev champs. And the developers honestly didn't seem to have any idea what we were talking about. And when they asked the question, they were like, that's a good idea. And, here it is. So the community coming through with this amazing aspect storage. Honestly, I think this is going to change the way that a lot of people play the game. You're going to hang on to more important items, and for the most part, you're just going to deconstruct most of your legendaries. When like in Season 3 or Season 2 or whatever, you would have tons of legendaries in here that were basically only there for the express purposes of saving them to deconstruct them for a legendary affix. So, aspect. So, like, for instance, this right here, which is a Ritual Dagger of the Elements, it has a perfect role on the, of the Elements aspect, right? So I would hang on to this in case I needed an of the Elements aspect, and I would destroy it. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. You just go destroy it. You just take the item, and you take it over to the blacksmith, and you just destroy it. And as soon as you destroy it, he extracts the aspect for you, and when he extracts the aspect, you basically get your aspect upgraded in the list. And if it does upgrade the aspect, it'll tell you up here, aspect has been upgraded, aspect of the elements upgraded in the Codex. And then when you go there and you look at the aspects in the Codex, you're going to see that it is now completely finished. So let me type in elements. And as you can see, it's 16 of 16, which is the highest tier. So we have the highest tier of the aspect of elements. It's a really good upgrade. It's huge. It's going to make a huge difference in like what you're collecting, how you're collecting stuff. It's going to be nice. I talked about the veiled crystal shortage already. That everything seems to cost veiled crystals. I did already cover that, but just touch on it one more time. It is really sad. And also, the developers have been made aware of it, and there is a message from Pez Radar talking about potentially fixing the veiled crystal shortage. So we'll have to see. Minions are quite powerful now. They inherit 100% of your stats, and I have checked out the Necromancer and I've checked out the Druid, and honestly, all of the minions are so much more powerful than they were before. It's really hard to understate this. Basically, everything from thorns being 100% inherited to critical strike chance to your damage with close, your damage modifiers, all of it, they are like insanely more powerful than they were before. And this is definitely the season to give a minion necromancer a try, for instance. Speaking of the Minion Necromancer, they made a whole lot of changes to the Minion Necromancer. Some pretty crazy stuff, like giving the Bone Mages abilities to cast Bone Spears, giving them finally an Unstoppable attached to one of the Golems, having like massive changes to the way that the minions actually function within the panel. So like, there's a lot of really neat stuff in here, like the Skeletal Defenders basically having a 99% damage reduction. The Reapers reducing cooldowns. They also have some pretty neat ones. Like I said, the Bone Splinters having a 25% chance to cast Bone Spear. I mean, all in all, like across the board, I think they're absolutely amazing. Like the Iron Golem has a pull-in now, which basically means that he can sort of replace your Corpse Tendrils if you want to use him instead of that. I mean, I've definitely seen some crazy, very powerful minion builds this season, or this PTR, and not only that, but I also checked out the Druids minions as well, and honestly, they're way more powerful than they were before. They're not holding you back anymore. They're actually carrying you through the dungeon at this point. And there's a lot of fun aspects that you can get, or affixes that you can get to enhance them as well. Like there's things that will basically make it so that your skeleton mages will attack multiple times. Like for instance, let me put my orb up here, and I believe it's, yeah, here it is. So minion attack speed, chance for skeleton mages to cast twice, skeleton priest effect duration. There's also a really neat new aspect that basically makes it so that your skeletal priests empowering will actually empower you as well, which is also really neat. So when you use your skeletal priest and it heals your group and provides them with a damage bump, it also does the same thing for you, which is pretty cool. Uniques feel less powerful than the legendaries now, except when they are required for the build. So I don't know what it is about the new legendaries and the old uniques and how they're currently balanced, because they really just haven't really touched the old uniques. A lot of the uniques are still basically the same uniques that we've always seen, and they haven't really changed a whole lot. But when you compare them to a likewise item, you start to get to the impression that, well, they're just not as powerful as the previous ones. I mean, they have 4 affixes on them, which is a thing, right? So they've got 4 affixes on them, and that's neat and all, but like when you look at one of your rings that has 5 affixes on it, and the 5 affixes are a lot more powerful than the 4 affixes that are currently on the ring, unless the unique item is specifically required for your build, it doesn't seem like the unique items are anywhere near as powerful as they were before. Now, there are certain exceptions, like Talrosh's Iridescent Loop, which gives you such a high multiplier, and some items specifically, like I said, that are almost required for your build can definitely be very powerful. But I've also noted that for the most part, whenever I was putting together a character, I was less inclined to include a unique if it didn't provide me with some sort of unique effect that I couldn't get elsewhere, because the power, like raw power that you're getting from the legendaries, just seemed to be better than the raw power that you were getting from the uniques, which is rather unfortunate. I would even go so far as to say that unless they rebalance the unique items a little bit, or buff up the total amount of power that they're giving you, you might want to avoid uniques entirely unless your build requires it. Like if you're a sorceress and you're using the new Fractured Winterglass amulet so that you can do the Frozen Orb build, then that's fine. If you're a sorceress and you're using the new Flame Weaver gauntlets because you want to do the Flame Weaver build with the Firebolts, then that's fine. But like, things like Penitent Greaves, like Tacits of the Dawning Sky, like there's definitely a lot less power in the uniques than they were before. Now the cool thing is the unique can roll with greater affixes too, just like your armor can. And if you do happen to find a greater affix rolled unique, they can be pretty powerful. And I can show you an example of that. I do have a very nice greater affix roll unique on the Sorceress right now. And basically what it is it's just when you find it, the greater affix can potentially roll on one or two of the aspects. It can actually roll on all four. We found one with all four. And this is an example of one of them right here, which is my Flame Weaver gloves, which rolled a greater affix on the attack speed, and it also rolled a greater affix on the Devouring Blaze, which was pretty nice. So both two very good ones for me to get a greater affix rolls on. And then of course this means that I have an absolutely excellent unique item by comparison. And of course I can upgrade it and then grab like a 25% increase on those rolls. And as you can see, I've got a huge amount of attack speed with this character. I'm actually running a base attack speed of nearly 100%, 87.9%. With just my equipment, like no additional modifiers, no Moonrise or any of the other attack speed bonuses that I could potentially get in buffs. This is literally just the attack speed that I currently have for my equipment, which is pretty darn cool. Every system at the moment seems to have some sort of issue, and honestly, it needs to be fixed. I can't really exemplify this enough. Like, they got some work to do before this season goes live. I feel like every single thing that I've tested out so far has had some sort of bug or some sort of problem with it. The tempering system and the masterworking system fail way too much. Varshawn doesn't respawn with the 200 boss like he's supposed to. Beast in the Ice isn't dropping his material for Endorial like he's supposed to, so you have to do like the 150 version to get the material. The freaking Dust Devils are literally covering the entire screen when the Barbarians are using it, which is absolutely insane. If you guys haven't seen the Dust Devils covering the entire screen, trust me, you don't want to, because you can't see anything. Literally, you can't see the floor, you can't see your character, you can't see like the ceiling, you can't see the monsters, you can't see your friends. When the Dust Devil Barbarian comes through, like it's literally like you're in a real Dust Devil in the middle of a desert, and there's literally sand pelting your eyes, and you're just like trying to rub the sand out of your eyes and hoping that and praying that you don't get eaten by a scorpion while you do, because that's literally what it's like at the current moment. And there's definitely some things that need to be tuned, and there's some things that need to be fixed, but it feels like everything at the moment is currently messed up or bugged in some way, shape, or form. Now, granted, it's a public test realm, and that's perfectly fine. It's a public test realm, and things need to be tested and fixed. Hopefully, a lot of these things that they currently have wrong with the game get addressed before Season 4 launches, because if they launched it in its current state, it would be pretty bad. A lot of people would be pretty pissed that they weren't getting materials for fighting, Andariel from Beast in the Ice. They would be people pretty pissed that they wasted all the materials fighting Varshawn, and then he doesn't respawn, and so forth and so on. I mean, it's a lot at the moment, but I'm confident that with the time period that they have available to them between now and when Season 4 actually launches, I think we've got a lot of stuff here. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, though, is that we don't know what this season mechanic is. So we still do not know what the season mechanic is. And this is kind of important because everything that we're testing right now, although it's fun to test these new mechanics that are, in the game, these new unique items and the new things that are going on, we don't know how the new season mechanic is going to interact with the current changes, right? Because for all we know, the season mechanic could make things extraordinarily stupid. Once we get into the new season, like these season mechanics could be so broken that literally, the builds that currently aren't broken could then become broken through the season mechanic, and we still haven't seen it yet. It would be nice to get some sort of inkling of what's going on with the season mechanic before things go live, but I don't know if they're going to have another PTR. Are we going to have a season PTR? Chances are not, because they like to keep the season mechanics a secret, which is silly, by the way, because it usually ends up with a bunch of things broken on season day launch, but I guess that's just how things are going to be. A lot of builds are overperforming tremendously, and will most likely get nerfed. This was actually stated by Pez Radar, so this isn't even just me saying that they're going to get nerfed. This is literally a statement by Pez Radar saying that a lot of builds are currently overperforming, and they're going to be looking at rebalancing them downward. Most likely things like the Dust Devil Barbarian, the Frozen Orb Sorceress, which is currently kind of overperforming. There's definitely some overperforming builds, and don't be surprised when they all get nerfed into oblivion. The pit doesn't give Glyphy XP, which is a really big negative in my opinion, because you basically are forced to grind the pit to upgrade your equipment, and as you grind the pit, you're getting no Glyphy XP, which means you have to go back to the Nightmare Dungeons to do the Nightmare Dungeons. But the silly thing is that once you gear up for the pit, like once you've got your character ready for the pit, the Nightmare Dungeons are basically garbage. Like you can do Nightmare Tier 100s in your sleep once you've set up for the pit. And yeah. Another thing that I'd like to talk about with the pit, which really kind of bothers me, is the random environmental effects are just really stupid. So basically, inside the boss fights, when you're fighting the boss, there are just these random things that are happening. They have no association with the boss itself, so there's no tell or anything. Like, you don't know that they're coming for the most part. Sometimes there's a little indicator on the ground, sometimes there's not. And they can range from everything from like big, wide, like AoEs, like tornadoes that knock you back and kill you, and tons of other things that are just completely unpredictable. And the best way that I can explain this is these random environmental effects are just pure, utter chaos. And once you get to a certain part in the pit where, you know, your damage reduction might not be enough or your health might not be enough, they will one-shot you. And they're very good at one-shotting you. And honestly, the one-shots are so random and ridiculous that it would be better if you could actually avoid these random environmental effects. But the silly thing is that the random environmental effects are so crazy and chaotic that half the time you have no hope in evading them except for to, like, kite the boss and run around in circles at the edge of the arena. And depending on the boss, some of them are so ridiculous. Like one of them in particular, the Beetle, which has his own environmental effects that compound on top of the environmental effects from the random ones that are also happening at the same time. It gets just really, really stupid. And you guys will see it. Eventually, you'll get to that level in the pit where you're just a little bit too far ahead of yourself. You'll clear the level, like no problem. You'll clear all the monsters, everything in the area just fine. But then when you get to the boss and the random environmental effects literally one-shot you because you weren't paying attention, and the guy was like on the other side of the screen when he spawned, but shot a projectile that went all the way across the screen and just one-taps you, you'll start to realize what I mean, that the random environmental effects are just nuts. There's everything from Lilith with her claws, Lilith with her spikes, World Tier 4 boss like random firing projectiles, like triangle, like floor-based effects. There's hurricane, like little tornado hurricanes that kind of remind me of Diablo 2 hurricanes because they just go randomly around the arena, but if they touch you, you're pretty much dead, and you can't really see them either, which is rather unfortunate because they're like the same color as the floor, and they're actually kind of hard to identify. And that's not even all of them. There's like tendrils that come out. There's basically, while you're fighting any of the existing bosses, they just have like 1,000 million random environmental effects, which are basically recycled old boss attacks, basically from previous bosses, and these recycled old boss attacks are just constantly assaulting you on a regular basis. And the other big issue with these random environmental effects is that when the boss is staggered, they keep going. So the random environmental effects just continue to go. They just continue going the entire time, even if the boss is staggered. So during the moment when you've been trained, almost like conditioned, like we're dogs or something, and they're like Pavlov's dog with the bell, and they start salivating, right? Like we've been conditioned to know that when a boss is staggered, it's safe, and that's the time when you dish out as much damage as you possibly can, right? Well, no, not in these pits, because in these pits, the environmental effects continue even when the boss is staggered and literally will absolutely annihilate you from existence. So you have to stay on your toes 100% of the time, even when the boss is staggered, which is just stupid. Boss materials. So boss materials have been dropping pretty much everywhere now. Helltides, they've been dropping in nightmare dungeons. I've even seen some boss materials just drop from random monsters as I've been running around the game world. It seems like they have definitely upped the overall boss material drop rate across the board. Like you, for instance, you can get exquisite bloods just doing Helltides. Which is pretty amazing. And like as a general rule of thumb, I'll say that it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to get the boss mats that you need to farm the bosses that you're trying to farm on a regular basis. Helltides are way better. Let's talk about Helltides for a second. So Helltides have gotten a bunch of additional things added in. Most notably is they pulled in a lot of mechanics from the vampire event back in season 2. Like for instance, they have a center event now, which is very similar to the vampire event. Basically, you go there, and once you're in the vampire event, you can spend a currency which is unique to the area, which you obtain in the area to basically spawn like an uber kind of like boss that everybody gets to fight. And it's pretty darn cool. It's usually denoted by a big skull on the map, although I don't see it right off the top of my head. I might just not be close enough. But this is the resource up here. You also have a pretty neat building threat meter, which when you're by yourself, it's not as cool. But when you're in a group, and this is actually really cool, is that when you're in a group with a bunch of other players and they have their threat meter building at the same time too, you can potentially have all the threat meters go off at one time. And you can basically have a huge amount of damage or monsters coming, and it's just absolutely insanely fun to spend some time and sit there and just dish out as much damage as you possibly can to this big giant pack of never-ending monsters that are coming. And this is the center little zone thing right here. You can see a big giant skull on the mini map. And when you get here, basically what you have to do is you have to put these materials into it, and once 3 materials have been put in, you basically have enough to summon the boss in the center. And honestly, it's really nice. It's actually pretty fun. I think a lot of people are going to spend a lot of time here in the Helltides because it goes across groups as well. So if you have, say, like 4 or 5 groups or 6 or 7 groups, and they're all here at the same time, and they're all putting in their baneful hearts, then you can get a pretty large amount of monsters all spawning at once. And then you combine in the threat meters going off at the same time, and you end up with some pretty darn cool stuff. Now, the Helltides have become insanely easy, though, which is unfortunate, because when they scaled up all the content with the pit and whatnot, they did make it a lot easier, well, way easier to clear stuff in there. However, I will say that the boss that comes from that center thing that I was just showing you does actually have the ability to one-shot even some of the most hardened veteran of characters. I think she actually has a one-shot ability. I'm not entirely sure, but there's been several times where I was taking no damage from anything, including her, and then all of a sudden I was just instantly dead. And several people have had it happen. Overconfident people who were like, oh man, she can't hurt me, I'll just go AFK, and then they come back and they've died like 3 or 4 times, which is pretty hilarious. Trade opens up a lot more group fun as well. So basically all items in the game are tradable. And you can essentially trade everything now except for Uber Unique. So you can literally just drop items on the ground for your friend, or you can trade them. And it's going to be a lot better of a group fun kind of a thing going on. So when you find that Hellhammer and your friend's been looking for it for 1,000 years, you can actually give it to them now, which is super duper cool. They let you zoom out the camera, which was really nice. So as you can see here right now, it doesn't look any more zoomed out than it was before. But when you go outside of town, that's when the zoom out happens. And I got to tell you, the zoom out all by itself is a feature that has definitely been worth using. I mean, I'm extremely impressed with the zoom out in general. Now, when you walk back into town, do keep in mind that it will zoom the camera back in. You notice it zoomed back in. But as soon as you walk back outside of town, the camera zooms back out, and you can resume your sexiness of having your zoomed out camera, which is definitely nice. Um, they reworked all the NPC locations, and I couldn't help but be angry at this at first. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I was pretty angry about this. I was constantly running to the wrong location. I had already learned all the locations, and as somebody who had already learned all the locations before in all the cities, it felt really annoying that they moved around all the locations of all the NPCs again. This is like the second time they've done this, by the way. And I can't help but feel like, like, can we just figure out where they go and stop moving them? I mean, I will say that after having played for a couple days, I do feel like the current locations that they have are definitely better than the previous locations. But at the same time, I really hope they don't make a habit out of this of moving the NPCs all over the place whenever they feel like it, constantly. Because it's really annoying to have to figure out where all the NPCs are every single time you log into the game for each season. For instance, the occultist for Kyovashad used to be over here, and now she's over here. The jeweler for Kyovashad used to be over here, and now she's over here. And so forth and so on. The Purveyor of Curiosities used to be over here. Actually, it used to be over here, then it was over here, and now it's over here. And you can see how it's getting a little bit annoying because now you have to relearn everything. So when you log back in for Season 4, you're going to have to relearn where all the NPCs are again. And you're probably going to feel just like me, a little bit annoyed that they moved all the NPCs around. But at the same time, you might eventually come to the same conclusion as me, which is it's a little bit better than it was before. I just really hope they don't make a habit out of moving them around all the damn time. Greater affixes are interesting, but they do make for some extremely powerful items. But honestly, they mostly just end up junk. Because you can't re-roll the greater affixes, or when you do, the greater affix is taken away, it causes an issue where basically, even if you do find an item with a greater affix, well, when you re-roll the item, the greater affix is lost. So you kind of just have to leave it as is, essentially. So like this particular item that has 139 intelligence and plus 5 to firebolt, and there are 2 greater affixes, I have to leave this as it is. I can't change those. I can change the maximum life, but I can't really change anything else other than the maximum life. That's the only one I can reroll. And if you have an item that actually rolls with all greater affixes, then basically all customizability of the item disappears. You can't re-roll any of the affixes at that point, because if you do, then obviously you're going to lose the greater affix rolls that you get. And what I mean by a lot of the times they end up as junk, well, a lot of the times you find greater affix rolls and it's something like this, like a greater affix roll on like cold resistance or something stupid like that. It's already so easy to cap out resistances that I'm not even really sure why you would ever want something like a greater affix roll on cold res, but I mean, maybe that helps you cap out your res with one item or something. But for the most part, I think a lot of the times you're going to find greater affix items, even ones that have multiple greater affixes, and they're basically just going to be trash, and you're just going to throw them away, which is, I think, is going to be pretty common. The affix pools are definitely much less contaminated with junk now than they were before. So, going over the affixes on legendary items, a lot of the times when you found a legendary item or even a rare item before, the affixes were just a lot of garbage. It was a lot of junk, like damage on Tuesday stuff and things that nobody wanted, that nobody was ever using. And they've kind of removed and condensed down a lot of those affixes into more workable affixes that make more sense. So that you have things that you're actually looking for rather than all the things that you aren't. I do, however, feel that despite the fact that they reduced the number of junk affixes in the pool, I feel like the tempering system unfortunately added a lot of those junk affixes back in a rather weird way, which is basically to say that, like, imagine this. They took all the junk affixes off of the items when you find them, and then they put the junk affixes that they still wanted in this, so that basically you were forced to pick whether or not you wanted the junk affix, which is, I think, a little bit better. Because in some ways, when you're talking about like what junk affixes you want, you're looking at it from a perspective of like, okay, well, I might not necessarily want something like like ice spike damage, right? But if I am building an ice spike sorceress, then I might want ice spike damage, right? So that's kind of like a thing that you can choose. But if you had ice spike damage roll on, say, like a pair of gloves or something, it would mostly be useless because most builds in the game don't use ice spike damage. So it's kind of neat that they took a lot of the lesser junk affixes and threw them in here, because if you still want them, you can still get them, but you can also easily avoid them by not choosing them. Now, I will also add in the fact, because I talked about this earlier, is that a lot of the times it feels like you're still ending up with junk affixes anyway, depending on what build you're on, because some builds definitely do have better affixes than others. I think I've covered just about everything except for the pit. And what can I really say about the pit? I've played the pit and I've gone up pretty high in the tiers and I've messed around with it, and honestly, it seems like eventually it's going to get pretty boring at a certain point. The fact that the pit doesn't have any glyphy XP, the fact that the pit doesn't really provide you with veiled crystals, which is an extreme demand at this particular point, and the fact that the pit literally goes up to tier 200 monsters, which I've got, I think I got 191 on here right now. But it's just one of those things that, like, it's the same exact experience over and over and over again. No items drop in there whatsoever unless you complete it. Dying, of course, basically makes it so that you can't complete the upgrade portion of it. So it's interesting is that when you fail the mastery of the pit, you basically just don't get the Neth Iron, the Ingolith, or the Abdusite. But you still get the rewards at the end, which is just generic drops. But if you're looking for like a large amount of equipment, Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons is probably better. If you're looking for materials, Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons is probably better. If you're looking for Scattered Prisms, well, those don't drop there. If you're looking for Veiled Crystals, well, those don't drop in the pit either. In fact, one of the problems I had in the game was finding Scattered Prisms, as they seem to be exceedingly rare in this new version of the game. Whereas before, it seemed like I was getting Scattered Prisms all the time from just about everywhere. World bosses, nightmare dungeons, like, killing specific bosses and so forth and so on, as well as in Helltides. The Scattered Prisms don't seem to be dropping anywhere near as often or with the same frequency as they did before, which I can only assume is a deliberate ploy to make them more rare as a crafting material. But the very interesting thing is that that's how I always assumed it was going to be. I always assumed Scattered Prisms would actually be rare, but they never were, and I guess now they are. I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. They also condensed down the herbs, so that was a whole other thing too. So the elixir slash herbs crafting. Basically, they condense down everything into a much more like logical and reasonable system. It's way better than the previous system. So basically, everything just gives you herbs, and the herbs can be used to craft elixirs. They kind of like condense down the tiers of elixirs as well, so there's less elixirs clogging up your consumable tab. I think in general you're going to find that this season is definitely going to be the season of not clogging up your inventory, because combined with obviously the more condensed elixirs, the fact that you are going to have a lot less items in your inventory in general. Rares, unfortunately, got the axe in this one, and I'm really hoping it's something that they change. But if they don't change it, again, you're going to have even less rares in your inventory. As of current, and this is something, the one last thing that I want to cover, is that rare items are basically garbage in this version of the game, and I'm really hoping that they change it. If you take a look at a rare item now, you will see that rare items essentially can have 2 affixes on them. They cannot roll more than 2. You can take them to the tempering, and you can temper them, and when you temper them, you will be able to put 2 additional affixes on the item, which brings them up to a total of 4. But because they are stuck at 4, they are essentially always going to be inferior to an item like a legendary, which rolls with 5 affixes. And this is unfortunate because this means essentially at this point that rare items are completely garbage, and there is no reason to pick them up or even utilize them in any way, shape, or form unless you just don't have something better to put in that slot, which is a legendary item, or you are leveling up and you're just trying to make do with what you can. But legendary items are basically always going to be better than rares at this point, And unique items are always going to be better than rares at this point because they have no way of becoming as powerful as legendary items, which is rather unfortunate. And it's a change that I do hope that they revert because rare items, as you guys know, were basically the most powerful items in the game up until Season 4. And essentially, if this patch goes live as it is, rare items will now become the least powerful items in the game as of Season 4. And so they are actually so bad at this point that once you actually have enough materials and you don't really need the money, you might as well not even pick them up because they have no purpose other than to be destroyed for materials or sold for gold, which is rather unfortunate. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I left out. I'm trying to be as thorough as I can. I know my videos are always long, but this one definitely is on the longer side here. But this is honestly one of the biggest patches that I've ever seen in a game. I mean, it would be an understatement for me to say that it's not a big patch because it's a really, really, really big patch. They've changed just about everything about the game to the point where literally, if the last time you played was like Season 1 or something like that, like Bob, for instance, who was in here earlier, who last time he played was Season 1, the amount of things that they've changed since Season 1 is so freaking drastic that it's not even the same game anymore. It's not. You're going to log in, you're going to have no clue what the NPCs are. You're going to have no clue how to upgrade your items. You're going to have no clue what the tempering system is. You're going to have no clue what the masterworking system is. You're going to have no clue where the pit is. You're going to have no clue like about all these changes to HellTide. You're going to be surprised about those. There's tons of new unique items. I mean, it's really difficult for me to explain all of these changes because it feels like it's not even the same game anymore. Like the game is under there somewhere, buried by everything that they've changed, moving the NPCs around, adding all the unique items, rebalancing everything. I mean, honestly, a lot of this stuff with like firing projectiles twice is brand new to the game as well, and it's really cool. I like it. I mean, if I have to give my personal opinion on the current changes, I like the changes. I do. I don't think the pit is too ridiculously difficult. I think we'll see a lot of builds that will be able to scale the pit if they keep it at its current difficulty, which I think they should. Because if they make it too difficult, they're going to narrow down the playing field way too much, and it's just going to be a one or two builds maxing out everything. But as it currently is, I think most builds can make it to the end of the pit. I think that's pretty much everything. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about the changes to Diablo 4 in the public test realm. And as new things come about, I'll try and keep you guys updated. They did say they were going to give us Season 4 details like sometime closer toward the launch of Season 4, so we'll keep our eyes open for that. And as always, if you enjoy my videos, be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button. And as always, keep watching.